In the global oil market, price movements often begin long before physical supply is disrupted. Sometimes a single military event lasting only minutes can trigger concern across energy trading desks, shipping companies, and national security agencies around the world. That reaction is driven by geography and risk. When missiles fly inside the Persian Gulf security zone, the question is never limited to the immediate target. The deeper concern is what the strike reveals about the stability of the region responsible for moving a large portion of the world's oil. That concern intensified when missiles were launched toward Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, one of the most important military installations supporting United States operations in the Gulf region. Prince Sultan Air Base sits roughly 70 kilometers southeast of Riyadh. On the surface, the location appears unusual for a frontline military site. It is deep inside Saudi territory, far from the Gulf coastline, and even farther from Iran itself. Yet the base holds major strategic importance. Over the past several years, it has served as a central hub for American air operations, intelligence coordination, and regional command functions. U.S. forces relocated significant assets there after concerns about the vulnerability of installations closer to the Gulf shoreline. The base supports surveillance aircraft, command and control platforms, and air defense coordination systems that monitor activity across much of the Middle East. Military planners rely on facilities like this to track missile launches, aircraft movements, and naval activity across a vast geographic area stretching from Iraq to the Arabian Sea. Because of that role, the base is not just another military installation. It is part of the wider architecture that allows the United States to maintain situational awareness across the region. When missiles were launched toward the facility, the event immediately raised several questions among defense analysts. The first question involved the type of weapons used. Iran has spent decades building a large missile arsenal, including short-range and medium-range ballistic systems capable of reaching targets throughout the Gulf. These missiles travel at extremely high speeds during their descent phase, making interception difficult even for modern air defense networks. Saudi Arabia operates multiple defensive layers designed to counter such threats. These include Patriot missile batteries and other radar systems intended to detect launches quickly and intercept incoming projectiles before they reach their targets. Reports indicated that defensive systems were activated shortly after the launch detection. Interceptors were fired to destroy the incoming missiles before impact. In military terms, the event resembled a rapid exchange between offensive missile forces and defensive interceptors, an interaction measured in seconds rather than minutes. Even when a strike is intercepted successfully, the event still carries strategic meaning. The fact that missiles were directed toward a base hosting U.S. personnel signals a willingness to test the defensive shield surrounding the American military presence in the region. Military analysts often look beyond the physical damage caused by an attack. Instead, they examine target selection. The choice of Prince Sultan Air Base suggests a deliberate message. The site represents a key node in the American military network that supports surveillance, coordination, and regional air operations. Targeting that node communicates pressure on the broader system. Another question raised by the strike concerns range and launch positioning. For missiles to reach a base located deep inside Saudi territory, they must be launched either from Iranian territory or from allied groups positioned elsewhere in the region. Iran maintains relationships with several armed organizations capable of launching missiles or drones. This network allows Tehran to project pressure across a wide geographic area without relying solely on launches from its own territory. From a strategic perspective, this approach complicates defensive planning. It increases the number of potential launch locations that military forces must monitor. The strike also triggered attention far beyond military circles. Energy traders and financial analysts began evaluating the implications almost immediately. The reason lies in geography. Saudi Arabia is one of the world's largest oil exporters. Much of that production travels through infrastructure concentrated along the eastern side of the country near the Persian Gulf. While Prince Sultan Air Base is not itself an energy facility, any military escalation inside Saudi territory raises concerns about the security environment surrounding that energy system. Oil markets react to risk as much as to confirmed supply loss. A missile strike directed at a major military base suggests that tensions between Iran and regional actors may be entering a more volatile phase. If escalation continues, energy infrastructure, shipping routes, or production facilities could become vulnerable. That possibility is enough to influence market expectations. For military planners, the strike also highlights a deeper challenge that has grown more visible over the past decade. Modern missile forces allow countries to threaten fixed installations across large distances. Even heavily defended bases must constantly adapt to evolving missile technologies. The interaction between offensive missile capabilities and defensive interception systems is becoming one of the defining features of modern regional security. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base, therefore, represents more than a single military event. It serves as an indicator of how missile warfare, regional rivalries, and global energy systems are increasingly connected. Understanding why Iran relies so heavily on missile forces requires looking at the broader structure of its military strategy. To understand why a missile strike against a Gulf military base carries strategic meaning, it is necessary to examine the structure of Iran's military doctrine. The Islamic Republic does not organize its armed forces around the same model used by large conventional militaries such as the United States. Instead, its defense system relies on a combination of missile forces, naval disruption capabilities, and regional allied groups. Missiles occupy a central role in that structure. Iran's conventional air force is limited. Many of its aircraft date back to the 1970s and face restrictions due to decades of sanctions that have complicated maintenance and modernization. Without a large modern fleet of combat aircraft, Iran has invested heavily in missile technology as an alternative method of projecting power. Ballistic missiles offer several advantages in this context. First, they allow a country to strike distant targets without risking pilots or aircraft. Once launched, the missile follows a high-speed trajectory toward its target. During the final phase of flight, the speed becomes extremely difficult to intercept, especially when multiple missiles are fired at the same time. Second, missile systems are mobile. Launchers can be hidden in mountainous terrain, underground facilities, or dispersed across large areas. This mobility makes it difficult for adversaries to locate and destroy the launch platforms before they fire. Third, missile production can be sustained domestically. Even under sanctions, Iran has built an industrial base capable of manufacturing many of the components required for ballistic missile systems. This reduces dependence on foreign suppliers. Because of these factors, missiles have become one of the primary tools through which Iran seeks to balance the military advantages held by larger powers. Strategic planners often describe this model as asymmetric deterrence. The concept is simple. When facing an opponent with stronger conventional forces, a state attempts to develop capabilities that can impose costs on that opponent in different ways. Missile forces allow Iran to threaten military bases, infrastructure, and logistical hubs across the Middle East. Many of these locations host American personnel or support U.S. military operations. The geography of the region amplifies the effectiveness of this strategy. Several Gulf countries host American bases positioned relatively close to Iran. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia all contain facilities used by U.S. forces. From Iran's perspective, these installations represent the operational backbone of American military power in the region. If tensions escalate, missile forces create the possibility of striking those nodes quickly. That does not necessarily mean Iran intends to destroy every installation during a crisis. Instead, the mere capability to threaten them becomes part of a deterrence equation. Military planners on all sides must consider the risk that bases, airfields, or command centers could come under attack. The strike directed toward Prince Sultan Air Base fits into this strategic logic. The base supports coordination and surveillance functions that contribute to the broader American military network across the Gulf. Targeting such a facility sends a signal about the vulnerability of that network. Missile strikes can also function as strategic messaging. Limited attacks allow a country to demonstrate capability without immediately triggering a full-scale war. The scale of the strike, the number of weapons used, and the choice of target all communicate different levels of escalation. Iran has used similar methods before. In several past incidents, missile launches were directed toward facilities associated with adversaries or toward symbolic targets meant to demonstrate reach. Each event carried both a tactical and a political message. Another important element of Iran's regional strategy involves distributed pressure through allied groups. Over the past several decades, Iran has built relationships with armed organizations across the Middle East. Some operate in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. These groups possess rockets, drones, and sometimes missile systems capable of reaching targets inside neighboring countries. From a strategic perspective, this network expands the number of possible launch points. Instead of relying exclusively on missiles fired from Iranian territory, pressure can originate from multiple directions. This complicates the defensive calculations of countries attempting to protect their infrastructure. Military analysts often describe this system as a layered pressure network. Direct missile forces in Iran form one layer. Regional partners equipped with rockets and drones form another. Together, they create a situation where adversaries must defend a large number of potential targets simultaneously. The Gulf region contains numerous critical assets. Oil facilities, ports, air bases, and shipping lanes are concentrated within relatively small geographic areas. Even a limited number of missiles or drones can generate significant concern because of the potential impact on these systems. This dynamic explains why missile activity in the region is monitored closely by both military intelligence services and financial markets. When missiles are launched toward a location, such as Prince Sultan Air Base, analysts evaluate several factors. They examine the number of missiles involved, the sophistication of the weapons used, the effectiveness of defensive systems, and the broader political context surrounding the strike. Each detail helps determine whether the event represents a contained signal or the beginning of a wider escalation cycle. Missile warfare has gradually become one of the defining features of security competition in the Middle East. Advances in missile accuracy, range, and production capacity have expanded the number of targets that can be threatened during a crisis. For countries relying on fixed infrastructure, military bases, energy facilities, and ports, this development introduces persistent vulnerability. The strike toward Prince Sultan Air Base illustrates how this strategic environment operates in practice. A small number of missiles can trigger defensive responses, intelligence analysis, and financial market reactions across multiple continents. Yet, the military dimension is only one part of the story. The moment missiles appear anywhere near the Persian Gulf security zone, attention shifts immediately to another system that connects the region to the global economy. That system is the international oil market. Oil markets respond to military activity in the Persian Gulf faster than almost any other financial system. The reason is structural. A large share of the world's energy supply moves through a relatively small geographic area, and even limited instability in that region can affect expectations about global supply. The Persian Gulf sits at the center of that system. Several of the world's largest oil exporters are located along its coastline. Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, and Iran collectively produce tens of millions of barrels of oil per day. Much of that production leaves the region through a narrow maritime corridor known as the Strait of Hormuz. A maritime choke point is a narrow passage where a large volume of global trade must move through a constrained geographic space. The Strait of Hormuz fits that definition precisely. At its narrowest point, the waterway is only about 40 kilometers wide, and the shipping lanes used by oil tankers are even narrower. Every day, a significant portion of the world's seaborne oil exports travels through this passage. Because of that concentration, oil markets pay close attention to any military development that might threaten shipping routes, energy infrastructure, or the stability of countries responsible for producing large volumes of oil. The missile strike toward Prince Sultan Air Base triggered attention in energy markets, even though the base itself is not an oil facility. The connection comes from regional risk. Military escalation involving Iran and Gulf states raises the possibility that future attacks could target energy infrastructure or shipping lanes. Oil prices respond not only to physical damage, but also to anticipated disruption. Traders operate on expectations about future supply. If geopolitical tension increases the probability that exports could be interrupted, market participants begin adjusting prices to reflect that possibility. This process happens quickly because oil is traded globally through financial markets that operate nearly around the clock. Energy traders evaluate several variables when such events occur. The first variable involves the location of the incident. If military activity occurs near major oil-producing states or near key shipping routes, the perceived risk rises sharply. Events inside Saudi Arabia or near the Strait of Hormuz immediately draw attention. The second variable concerns the potential for escalation. A single missile strike might not disrupt supply by itself. Yet if it signals a broader confrontation between regional powers, the risk of additional strikes increases. The third variable involves the type of infrastructure that could be affected next. Oil production relies on a complex chain of facilities. These include drilling sites, processing plants, export terminals, pipelines, and tanker loading ports. Damage to any part of that system can reduce the amount of oil reaching global markets. Saudi Arabia's energy infrastructure is particularly significant. The country produces several million barrels of oil per day and operates some of the largest processing and export facilities in the world. Any perceived threat to those systems attracts immediate attention from energy traders. Past events demonstrate how sensitive markets can be, to military developments in the region. In 2019, drone and missile attacks struck Saudi oil facilities at Abqaiq and Kurais. The incident temporarily disrupted a large portion of Saudi oil production and caused a sharp spike in global oil prices. The market reaction occurred almost immediately after the attack became public. That event revealed how quickly energy systems can be affected when critical infrastructure is targeted. Even when attacks do not directly hit oil facilities, they still influence market expectations. Military activity inside Saudi Arabia signals that the security environment around the country's energy system is becoming less predictable. Another factor influencing market reactions involves shipping risk. Oil exports from Gulf producers depend on tanker fleets moving through the Strait of Hormuz. These vessels travel along established routes monitored by naval forces from several countries. When regional tensions increase, insurance costs for tanker operators often rise. Insurance companies evaluate the probability that ships could be damaged, seized, or caught in military confrontations. If the perceived risk increases, shipping companies must pay higher premiums to operate in the region. Higher shipping costs can influence the price of oil delivered to international markets. Financial markets also respond to the possibility of naval disruption. Iran possesses naval capabilities designed to threaten shipping traffic in the Strait of Hormuz during a crisis. These include fast attack craft, naval mines, and anti-ship missiles positioned along the coastline. Even limited interference with shipping lanes could slow the movement of oil tankers leaving the Gulf. The mere possibility of such disruption creates uncertainty about the stability of global energy supply. Oil traders attempt to incorporate that uncertainty into pricing models. For this reason, energy markets track military developments in the Gulf region with extraordinary sensitivity. Missile launches, naval incidents, and air defense engagements all feed into a broader assessment of regional stability. The strike toward Prince Sultan Air Base therefore had implications extending far beyond the military installation itself. From the perspective of oil markets, the event represented a signal that tensions between Iran and Gulf states remain active and capable of escalating quickly. Even if the missiles were intercepted successfully, the fact that such an attack occurred indicates that the region's security environment continues to carry risk. That risk is what oil markets react to. Understanding how these military events interact with energy systems leads to a larger question about the long-term structure of security in the Gulf. The United States maintains a network of bases and military partnerships across the region, partly to stabilize the flow of energy through these vital trade routes. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base therefore raises a broader issue about the resilience of that security architecture. For decades, the United States has maintained a large military presence across the Persian Gulf. This posture developed gradually after the late 20th century as Washington sought to protect energy flows, reassure regional partners, and deter potential adversaries from threatening key shipping routes or oil infrastructure. The system that emerged is often described as forward presence. Forward presence means positioning military forces inside or near a region where strategic interests are concentrated. Instead of deploying forces only during a crisis, troops, aircraft, and naval assets remain stationed at bases across multiple countries. These installations provide rapid response capability and allow commanders to monitor regional developments continuously. The Gulf region contains several such facilities. U.S. forces operate from air bases in Qatar, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Naval forces maintain a significant presence in Bahrain, where the U.S. Fifth Fleet oversees maritime security operations across the Gulf and surrounding waters. Additional logistics hubs and support installations exist throughout the region. Together, these bases form a network. Each installation performs specific functions. Some host fighter aircraft and aerial refueling tankers. Others support intelligence collection, surveillance systems, and command coordination. Naval facilities protect shipping lanes and monitor activity near critical maritime choke points. Prince Sultan Air Base fits into this structure as a key coordination node. Facilities like this help integrate air operations across the region. Surveillance, aircraft, and radar systems track potential threats, while command centers coordinate defensive responses when missiles or drones are detected. Without these hubs, maintaining a clear operational picture across the Gulf would become far more difficult. The strike directed toward the base, therefore, touches on a broader strategic issue. Modern missile technology allows adversaries to threaten fixed installations across large distances. Ballistic missiles can reach targets hundreds or even thousands of kilometers away, depending on the system used. Precision guidance systems have also improved significantly over the past 2 decades, increasing the ability of missiles to strike specific targets. This development introduces a structural vulnerability. Military bases are large, permanent facilities. They contain runways, radar installations, fuel storage, and communication equipment. While defensive systems can intercept many incoming threats, the base itself cannot move. Once its location is known, it remains a potential target during any crisis. Countries that rely on forward military presence must therefore invest heavily in defensive infrastructure. Air defense systems, radar networks, hardened shelters, and redundancy in command structures all play a role in protecting these installations. Yet, defense planners understand that interception is never guaranteed. Missile attacks are often designed to overwhelm defenses by launching multiple weapons at once. The interaction between offensive missile forces and defensive interception systems has become one of the central dynamics shaping military planning in the Gulf. From the American perspective, maintaining regional bases continues to offer major advantages. Forward presence shortens response times, strengthens partnerships with regional allies, and provides continuous monitoring of developments across the Middle East. At the same time, adversaries increasingly possess tools capable of threatening those bases. Iran's missile arsenal is one example. The country has spent decades expanding the range, accuracy, and quantity of its missile forces. These weapons provide Tehran with the ability to pressure installations that host U.S. forces without engaging directly in large-scale conventional warfare. The strike toward Prince Sultan Air Base illustrates how that pressure can appear. Even if defensive systems intercept incoming missiles, the event still demonstrates that bases supporting American operations remain within range of potential attacks. Military planners must factor that risk into decisions about force deployment and infrastructure protection. Some analysts argue that this environment could lead to adjustments in how military forces are distributed across the region. Instead of concentrating large numbers of aircraft and personnel at a small number of major bases, future strategies may involve dispersing assets across multiple locations. Smaller installations, temporary airfields, and mobile command systems could reduce the vulnerability associated with fixed facilities. Another approach involves strengthening integrated air defense networks among regional partners. Several Gulf states already operate advanced missile defense systems, including Patriot and other interception platforms. Linking these systems together allows radar data and threat information to be shared across national boundaries. Such cooperation increases the likelihood that incoming missiles can be detected and intercepted quickly. Beyond the military dimension, the stability of the Gulf security architecture carries global economic significance. The region remains one of the world's most important sources of oil exports. Ensuring that energy infrastructure and shipping routes remain secure has been a long-standing objective of U.S. strategy in the area. The presence of American naval and air forces contributes to maintaining that stability. Events like the strike toward Prince Sultan Air Base remind policymakers that the security environment surrounding those energy systems remains contested. Missile technology, regional rivalries, and shifting alliances continue to influence the balance of power in the Middle East. Each incident provides new data points for military planners evaluating how deterrence functions under modern conditions. For energy markets, these developments are monitored closely. Traders understand that even limited military incidents can signal deeper shifts in regional stability. When missiles appear near installations connected to the Gulf security network, analysts immediately begin evaluating the implications for shipping routes, oil production, and geopolitical risk. The strike on Prince Sultan Air Base therefore illustrates the intersection of several systems operating at once. A military confrontation involving missile forces, a regional security architecture designed to protect critical infrastructure, and a global energy market sensitive to any sign that instability might disrupt supply. Understanding how these systems interact helps explain why a brief exchange of missiles and interceptors can send signals far beyond the desert where the event occurred.